I'm Stacy Roberts, 25 years old, and my mom has always played favorites, treating my younger sister like royalty while I scraped by on my own. I'd built up my savings working as a remote programmer in Denver, grinding through late nights to afford a decent life. But when my sister racked up $15,000 in debt from reckless spending, my mom showed up at my door demanding I cover it. "Family sticks together," she said, her voice sharp, like it was my duty to bail them out again. I refused flat out, telling her I'd earned that money the hard way and wouldn't hand it over. Her face twisted in anger, and she stormed off, slamming the door behind her. That night, while I slept, she snuck back in with the spare key I'd forgotten to take back. The next morning, my phone buzzed with bank alerts my credit card drained. Savings wiped out on payments for my sister's mess. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. But I stayed silent. No calls, no confrontation. Just plan my next move. What happened after exposed their scheme, turned the tables, and left them facing consequences they never saw coming. If you've ever felt trapped by family demands, you won't believe how this unfolds. Drop in the comments. What's the wildest thing a family member has demanded from you? Let's see how many can relate. That morning, I woke to my phone buzzing with bank alerts. I grabbed it, still half asleep, and logged into the app. My credit limit was maxed out. $15,000 gone in overnight charges. The transactions listed payments to credit companies, all tied to my sister's debts. My stomach twisted as I scrolled through them, each one a punch to the gut. How had this happened? I remembered the spare key I'd given Mom years ago, the one she still had. She must have come back after our argument. My hands steadied as I dialed her number, the anger building with each ring. She picked up, sounding casual, like nothing was wrong. "Morning, Stacy. Sleep well." I cut straight in, voice low but firm. "You took my credit card and drained my savings for Misty's debts." Silence stretched, then she sighed, not even denying it. "You were being stubborn. Misty needed help, and family steps up. You'll get over it once you see her back on track." Her tone dripped with that familiar manipulation, like she was doing me a favor. I gripped the phone tighter, the betrayal hitting hard. "That's theft, Mom. You broke into my place." She laughed lightly, brushing it off. "Don't be dramatic. It's not like I stole from a stranger. Cancel the charges if you're so upset. But the payments are already processed." I hung up before she could twist it more, my mind racing. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was years of favoritism boiling over. I needed advice. So I texted Lori Patterson, my best friend since college. We met at a coffee shop downtown, the Rocky Mountains visible through the window. She listened as I explained the alerts and the call, her eyes widening. "That's insane, Stacy." She crossed a line. I nodded, the shock fading into resolve. Lori leaned forward. "Practical, as always. Don't react yet. Gather evidence first, security footage from your building, those transaction details. Then hit her with facts." We spent the next hour planning, her words grounding me. By the time we left, I felt ready to fight back. Step by step, back at my place. I pulled up the building's security app on my laptop. The footage from last night showed Mom slipping in through the side door around midnight, her face half hidden under a hood, then leaving 30 minutes later with what looked like a small bag. My pulse quickened as I saved the clip, the grainy image making it all too real. This was solid proof she'd entered without permission. Next, I dug into my email for the bank statements, printing out the transaction logs with timestamps matching the video. Each charge linked directly to Misty's creditor accounts. No ambiguity there. I even found old texts from Mom over the past week, pressuring me about the debt. One reading. Misty's in deep. You can't let her drown. Those would tie her motive together, with the files organized in a folder. I felt a surge of control, the initial shock from the call giving way to sharp focus. Lori stuck around, helping me label everything methodically. "This is airtight," she said, her voice steady as she cross-referenced the dates. We wrapped up by early afternoon, my desk cluttered with papers and the laptop screen frozen on Mom's exit. That's when I decided to loop in my dad. Curtis Roberts. He'd moved to a small town outside Denver after the divorce, keeping his distance from Mom's chaos. I hadn't talked to him much lately, but he knew her patterns better than anyone. His phone rang twice before he answered. His tone warm but cautious. "Stacy, everything all right?" I laid it out quick, skipping the emotional buildup. "Dad, Mom used my credit card to pay $15,000 of Misty's debts without asking. I have footage and records." He went quiet. Then exhaled slowly. "That's her all over again. Remember Grandpa's will? He set up that trust with a clause for exactly this. Any fraud against family means forfeiture of shares." My interest peaked. I'd heard whispers about it years back but never dug in. "Tell me more." Curtis explained over the next 20 minutes. His words measured. Grandpa had divided his estate evenly, but buried in the fine print was protection against financial harm to kin. Designed after spotting Mom's habits during his last years, her share sat at $180,000, Misty's at $45,000, both locked until certain ages, if convicted. It all shifted to the remaining beneficiaries, me and the cousins. As secondary trustee, I could enforce it. "File with the court once you have charges," he added. "I'll email the documents tonight." Hanging up. A plan solidified in my head. Lori caught my eye, nodding. "That's your leverage. Pair it with the evidence and they can't wiggle out." We reviewed the trust papers he sent later that evening, her questions sharpening my strategy. By nightfall, the folder felt like a weapon, ready for the next push. With the folder ready, I headed to the local police station in downtown Denver. The building stood stark against the mountain backdrop, and I walked in with Lori by my side for support. We asked for the fraud unit, and soon Detective Teresa Wong met us in a small interview room, her badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She listened intently as I laid out the sequence, starting with the unauthorized charges and showing her the printed statements. "This looks serious," she said, flipping through the pages, her expression turning professional. I played the security footage on my phone, zooming in on Mom's figure entering and exiting my apartment. Teresa nodded, taking notes. Clear entry without permission, timed with the transactions that's strong. She asked about family ties, and I explained the favoritism. How Mom always bailed Misty out while leaving me to fend for myself. Lori chimed in occasionally, confirming details from our planning session. By the end, Teresa assured us she'd open a case, request full bank records, and schedule interviews. "We'll contact your mother soon," she added, handing me a case number. Leaving the station, a mix of relief and nerves washed over me, the weight of escalation hitting full force. 2 days later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was Jeremy Vaughn, my sister's fiancé, sounding tense. "Stacy, we need to meet. Alone." I agreed to a neutral spot, a park near the Platte River, where joggers passed by under the clear sky. He arrived looking disheveled, hands in his pockets, and sat on a bench beside me. "I didn't know about the card," he started, avoiding my eyes. "Misty said you'd loaned the money for her debts, that it was family help." I pressed him, and he admitted overhearing the police visit at their apartment. They questioned her yesterday. She confessed everything to me after. The story spilled out Misty had scoped my place weeks earlier during a visit, noting where I kept financial stuff. She'd pushed Mom to take the card, arguing I'd never agree outright. Texts between them planned the timing, even joking about my passive nature folding under pressure. Jeremy showed me screenshots on his phone, dates matching my footage. "This isn't who I thought she was," he said. Voice breaking. He had ended the engagement that morning, returned the ring amid her pleas. "She's devastated, but I can't marry someone who'd scheme like that." I forwarded the screenshots to Teresa right there, strengthening the case. Jeremy left with a nod, wishing me luck. And I sat alone for a moment, the river's flow mirroring my swirling thoughts. This revelation shifted everything, turning Misty from beneficiary to active plotter. The courthouse in Denver loomed ahead as I arrived early for the hearing. I took a seat in the back row, the wooden benches creaking under the weight of anticipation. Mom and Misty entered with their lawyer, Philip Dawson, both dressed in conservative outfits that couldn't hide their strained expressions. Uncle Marvin trailed behind, his face set in determination, clearly there to play mediator. The judge called the case, and the prosecutor outlined the charges: unauthorized use of credit card, leading to $15,000 in fraudulent payments. Teresa stood by, presenting the evidence. We'd compiled the footage, texts, bank logs. Mom shifted uncomfortably as the video played on a screen, her nighttime visit undeniable. When it was time for pleas, Philip stepped forward. "Your Honor, my clients wish to enter guilty pleas under the agreement." The judge peered over her glasses. "Proceed with allocution." Mom went first, her voice barely above a whisper. "I accessed my daughter's apartment without consent, took her credit card, and made payments on my other daughter's debts knowing she hadn't approved." The admission hung in the air, her shoulders slumping as murmurs rippled through the sparse audience. Misty followed, eyes downcast. I assisted by identifying where she kept her cards during a prior visit, and I knew the funds were taken improperly. Her words cracked, the courtroom silence amplifying her discomfort. Uncle Marvin rose during a break, approaching me in the hallway. "Stacy, this has gone far enough. Drop it for the family's sake." I shook my head, unmoved. They chose this path. He pressed on, arguing about healing and forgiveness, but his pleas fell flat against the facts. The judge denied his informal intervention, ruling it irrelevant, back in session. She accepted the pleas. 3 years probation each, 200 hours community service, full restitution within 30 days, and mandatory counseling. Fail any term, and it's jail. Mom and Misty nodded, the reality sinking in as they signed the papers. Philip whispered to them, his strategy crumbling, leaving the building. I caught Uncle Marvin's defeated glance, his attempt to salvage things ending in failure. The day's events sealed their accountability, the public record now etched with their actions. A week after the hearing, I met Curtis at his place on the outskirts of Denver. He had the trustee paperwork ready, his small home filled with books on estate law. We reviewed the clause in Grandpa's will, ensuring every detail matched the conviction. "This triggers the forfeiture," he confirmed, signing as co-trustee. I filed the notice with the court that afternoon, the clerk stamping it efficiently. The process would take about 60 days, but the intent was clear. Mom and Misty's shares would shift to me and the cousins for financial harm to family. Curtis drove me back, his silence heavy with the family's fracture. "You did what you had to," he said finally. "Back home." I waited for the ripples. Mom called a few days later, her voice edged with desperation. "Stacy, Philip says the trust is in jeopardy. We need to talk." I kept it brief. "It's already filed. The clause applies." She begged for reconsideration, promising changes. But I ended the call. Misty texted sporadically, Vague apologies mixed with pleas for mercy. I ignored them, focusing on my routine. 2 months passed, and the administrator's letter arrived, forfeiture approved. Mom's $180,000 and Misty's $45,000 redistributed. The check for my share landed soon after. $140,000 deposited securely. The fallout hit them hard. Mom's employer ran a background check for her renewal certification and let her go, citing the criminal record. She scrambled for part-time gigs, her savings depleted from legal fees. Misty faced worse creditors hounded her anew, and with probation restricting travel. Job options shrank. She applied for loans to cover restitution. But high interest rates at 23% trapped her in a cycle, payments stretching years. Uncle Marvin reached out once, admitting the intervention failed. "They're struggling. Stacy," I replied simply. "Consequences." Lori and I grabbed coffee weekly, her support steady as I rebuilt. The money stayed untouched, a buffer for my future. Mom and Misty's world narrowed, probation meetings and service hours filling their days. Isolation growing as relatives distanced themselves. Their choices echoed back, reshaping everything without a path to reversal. Months later, I blocked every contact from them. No more voicemails pleading for understanding. No texts weaving excuses about hardship. The silence brought clarity. A quiet space in my Denver apartment where I could focus on what came next. Lori and I started hiking the trails near Boulder every weekend, her energy pulling me through steep inclines and winding paths. "You've earned this freedom," she'd say, passing a water bottle at the summit. Those outings rebuilt my stamina, both physical and mental, turning exhaustion into steady progress. At work, I pitched a new project to my team, a software tool for remote monitoring that landed a promotion and a raise. The extra income let me upgrade my setup, adding a second screen and noise-canceling headphones for uninterrupted coding sessions. Curtis visited once a month. Our dinner's simple but meaningful grilled steaks and talks about his retirement plans. He'd share stories of Grandpa's business savvy, reminding me where my drive came from. "He'd be proud," Curtis said one evening. Clinking glasses. I nodded, feeling the truth of it, with the inheritance funds invested in a high-yield account. I set up an emergency buffer and even took a short trip to the Grand Canyon, the vastness below mirroring the expanse in my life. Misty's updates trickled through mutual acquaintances, her call center job barely covering basics, probation check-ins draining her time. Mom downsized to a studio near the mountains, her certification loss forcing her into odd jobs like data entry. They navigated their isolation, relatives fading as the record lingered. Lori suggested therapy for me, not to heal old wounds, but to process the shift. Sessions helped frame the lesson boundaries aren't walls, they're foundations. Family ties thrive on mutual respect, not one-sided demands. When manipulation erodes trust, cutting ties preserves your core. For anyone watching, recognize the signs: early unmet expectations, guilt trips, endless favors. Stand firm, build your path, and let consequences teach what words can't. True strength lies in choosing peace over obligation.
"Hey babe, caught 3 fish today. The solitude is really helping clear my mind." I stared at Nathan's text message, then at the photo on my screen showing him lounging at a beachfront bar in Punta Cana, his arm draped around his secretary. The timestamp read, 2 minutes ago. "That's wonderful, honey," I typed back, my fingers steady despite the rage building inside me. "I'm so glad you're finding peace in nature." My name is Liana Thompson, and until 10 minutes ago, I thought I had a solid marriage. But then my colleague Rachel rushed into my office at our law firm in Denver, her face flushed with concern. "You need to see this," she'd said, pulling up Brianna Moore's Facebook page. There was my husband of 8 years, supposedly on a wilderness retreat to detox from work stress, living it up at a luxury resort with his 20-something secretary. I kept scrolling through the photos. Sunset walks on the beach, candle-lit dinners, stolen kisses by the pool. Each one time-stamped and tagged with nauseating captions like, "Finally with my true love," and "No more hiding." The irony of their carelessness almost made me laugh. "Oh my God, Liana, I'm so sorry," Rachel whispered, reaching for my hand. "What are you going to do?" I closed my laptop slowly, years of courtroom experience keeping my expression neutral. Nathan had no idea that his perfectly planned camping trip was crumbling, because his mistress couldn't resist posting their romantic getaway on social media. He had no idea that while he sipped cocktails and betrayed our marriage, he'd given me everything I needed to destroy him. "First," I said, pulling out a legal pad, "I'm going to text my darling husband and ask if the fish are biting." I sent another message. "Miss you so much. Can't wait to hear all about your wilderness adventures." Rachel watched me, confusion clear on her face. "Shouldn't you confront him?" I smiled, remembering every case I'd won by letting my opponents think they had the upper hand. As a corporate attorney, I'd learned that the element of surprise was often the most powerful weapon in my arsenal. Nathan thought he was so clever with his camping story, never considering that his mistress's social media addiction would be his downfall. "Do you know what's better than catching him in a lie?" I asked Rachel, already drafting notes on my legal pad. "Letting him keep lying while I dismantle his entire life." Nathan and I met at Stanford Law School. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed to share my values of hard work and dedication. While other couples in our class drifted apart under the pressure of grueling study schedules and competitive internships, we grew stronger. At least, that's what I thought. After graduation, I turned down an offer from a prestigious firm in New York to stay in Denver with Nathan. He'd landed a position at Morrison & Webster, one of the city's top investment firms, and I didn't want us to start our marriage with a long-distance relationship. "You're making the right choice," he'd said. "We're a team." I found my own success at Lambert & Cole, quickly rising through the ranks to become their youngest corporate attorney. Nathan seemed proud of my achievements, though looking back, I noticed how his smile would tighten whenever clients specifically requested me for their cases. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but whose is? When tensions rose, we dealt with them like lawyers, negotiating, compromising, finding middle ground. Then Brianna arrived at his firm 6 months ago, young, attractive, and apparently very good at her job, according to Nathan's frequent mentions. "She's so efficient," he'd say. "Finally, a secretary who can keep up with my schedule." I ignored the warning bells. After all, I trusted my husband. Rachel's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Remember when he missed your anniversary dinner last month? Said he had to work late?" I pulled up Brianna's Facebook page again, scrolling back through her timeline. There it was, a check-in at Barolo Grill, the same night. The caption read, "Late night at the office never felt so good." "I can't believe I was so blind," I muttered, but Rachel shook her head. "You weren't blind, Liana. You were trusting. There's a difference." I thought about all the other signs I'd dismissed. The new gym membership he never used. The sudden interest in work conferences out of state. The passwords changed on his phone and laptop. Classic signs I'd seen in countless divorce cases I'd handled. Yet I'd convinced myself our marriage was different. "You know what the worst part is?" I said, pulling up our joint account records. "He's using our money to finance their little romance." Rachel's eyes widened as I showed her the recent transactions. First-class tickets to Punta Cana, a 5-star resort? "Yes," I replied, already drafting an email to my bank. But not for long. I spent the next hour methodically documenting every suspicious transaction from our joint accounts. Living room forgotten, dinner growing cold, none of it mattered as I built my case. The evidence was damning. Expenses for jewelry I'd never received, dinners at restaurants I'd never visited, hotel charges in cities where Nathan had claimed to be meeting clients. "Look at this," I said to Rachel, pointing at my screen. He booked their Punta Cana trip 3 months ago. This wasn't spontaneous. He's been planning it.
But why tell you he was going camping? Why not just say it was another business trip?
I was about to respond when my phone buzzed with another text from Nathan. This time, he'd sent a photo, a generic camping scene clearly pulled from the internet, showing a tent pitched by a lake. "Home sweet home," his message read. "The stars are amazing out here." My hands started shaking, not from sadness, but from pure, cold rage. 8 years of marriage, and he couldn't even be bothered to find a convincing photo to support his lie. I opened my email and found what I was looking for. Nathan's firm's employee handbook sent to me months ago when I'd helped review some contracts for them. Right there, in bold text. Relationships between supervisors and direct reports are strictly prohibited and will result in immediate termination. "Rachel," I said slowly, "did you know Brianna has been documenting their entire relationship on Instagram too?" We pulled up her profile. It was a goldmine, months of subtle photos, each one damning in its own way. Coffee cups with Nathan's name visible, his watch in the corner of dinner photos, even a selfie in his office after hours, her perched on his desk while he smiled up at her. "It gets worse," Rachel said, her voice tight. She'd been digging deeper into the financial records I'd pulled up. "Look at these transfers." My stomach dropped as I saw what she'd found. Nathan hadn't just been spending our joint money on his affair. He'd been moving substantial sums into a private account for months, an account I knew nothing about. $90,000, I whispered, staring at the total. "He's been hiding money." "That's more than just affair money," Rachel said carefully. "That looks like exit strategy money," I finished. "He's been planning to leave me." The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just an affair, it was a calculated plan. While I'd been building our life together, he'd been planning his escape with a younger woman, systematically hiding assets and preparing to blindside me. I stood up, my decision made. "Rachel, I need a favor. Can you cover my meetings for the rest of the week?" "Of course," she said. "What are you going to do?" I picked up my phone, composing another sweet text to my husband about how much I missed him. I'm going to make him wish he'd never learned how to lie. The next morning, I walked into Harriman Credit Union as soon as they opened. The manager, recognizing me from the corporate accounts I handled, immediately ushered me into his office. "Mrs. Thompson, what brings you in so early?" "I need to discuss some suspicious activity on my joint accounts," I said, sliding across printouts of Nathan's transfers. "I believe my husband has been moving money without my knowledge or consent." Within an hour, I had frozen our joint accounts and transferred my personal assets to a new, secure account. Nathan wouldn't discover this until he tried to access the money, likely when it was time to pay for his romantic getaway. Back at my office, I began phase 2. I called Nathan's firm's HR director, Susan Mills, an old client of mine. "Susan, I need to discuss a sensitive matter," I began. "It's about Nathan and his secretary." "Brianna Moore?" Susan's voice sharpened. "What about them?" I forwarded her a carefully curated selection of Brianna's social media posts. "I believe this violates your firm's policies on supervisor-subordinate relationships." The silence on the other end was telling. "I'll need to escalate this immediately," Susan finally said. "This is extremely concerning." "I understand," I replied, keeping my voice professional. "I just thought you should be aware." Next, I called our locksmith. Being the one who handled all our home maintenance had its advantages. Nathan had never bothered to learn any of these details. "Yes, I need an urgent replacement of all locks. Today, if possible." While waiting for the locksmith, I began packing Nathan's belongings. Each designer suit, each expensive tie, each monogrammed shirt went into heavy-duty garbage bags. 8 years of marriage reduced to black plastic sacks on our pristine driveway. My phone buzzed. Another text from Nathan. "Missing you. Can't wait to tell you all about my adventures." I smiled, typing back, Miss you too. Hey, quick question. Did you remember to pay the credit card bill before you left? His response came quickly. Of course, honey. Don't worry about anything. Another lie. I knew he hadn't paid it because I was looking at the overdue notice right now. He'd been too busy planning his getaway to handle basic responsibilities. Rachel called around noon. Liana, you need to see this. Brianna just posted again. I pulled up Facebook. There was my husband, raising a champagne glass on a sunset cruise. The caption read, "Living my best life with my soulmate. No more hiding." No more hiding indeed, I murmured, forwarding the photo to Susan at HR. The locksmith arrived just as I received an email from my divorce attorney confirming she'd filed the paperwork. Everything was falling into place. Then my phone rang. Nathan's boss, James Morrison himself. Liana, he said, his voice grave. I assume you know why I'm calling? I can guess. We had no idea. He's been embezzling client funds to finance this affair. The photos triggered an internal audit. It's bad. I closed my eyes, processing this new information. How bad? Criminal charges bad. We're filing a police report. I hung up, feeling a strange mix of vindication and nausea. I hadn't expected this level of betrayal, but it only confirmed I was doing the right thing. Looking at the garbage bags on the driveway, I added one final touch. A note taped to the top bag. Hope the camping trip was worth it. Don't forget to post pictures. I was reviewing the final draft of my divorce filing when my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. Something made me answer. Is this Liana Thompson? A woman's voice, unfamiliar and nervous. Yes, who is this? My name is Sarah. I was Brianna's roommate until last month. There's something you need to know. My heart started racing. I'm listening. This isn't the first time they've done this, Sarah said. Brianna, she and Nathan, they've pulled this scheme before, at his last firm. I sat down heavily in my office chair. What scheme? They target wealthy executives, get compromising photos, then threaten to expose everything unless they're paid off. But this time was different. Brianna actually fell for Nathan. She broke their pattern, started posting everything online. He's furious. The room seemed to spin. I thought of the money Nathan had been moving, the client funds he'd been embezzling. This wasn't just an affair. It was an elaborate con that had spiraled out of control. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because Brianna called me crying last night. Nathan's threatening to pin everything on her. She's terrified. I hung up and immediately called James Morrison back. James, we need to talk. This goes deeper than you think. Within an hour, I was sitting in his office laying out everything Sarah had told me. James looked physically ill. 3 other firms, he said, scanning through the evidence I'd gathered. 3 other executives blackmailed. How did we miss this? Because they were careful, I replied, until Brianna went off script. My phone buzzed. Nathan again. Having dinner by the campfire. Wish you were here. I stared at his message, seeing it for what it really was, not just a lie, but part of a calculated scheme. All those business trips, those late nights at the office. How many other cons had he run that I didn't know about? James leaned forward. Liana, we need to handle this carefully. If what you're saying is true, this is now a federal case. Wire fraud, blackmail, embezzlement. I know exactly how we need to handle it, I said, pulling out my phone. I typed a message to Nathan. Darling, there's been a problem with one of our accounts. Can you check your email? Then I sent him a carefully crafted email, one containing screenshots of his previous schemes, Brianna's social media posts, and Sarah's statement. I added one line. Guess your camping trip just got interrupted. Within minutes, my phone exploded with notifications. Nathan, finally dropping his camping pretense, called 6 times. Brianna posted a long, tearful video confession on Facebook before deleting her entire account. The house of cards was collapsing. James had already contacted the FBI. They want to meet tomorrow morning, he said. This could be huge. I nodded, feeling strangely calm. I'll be there. That evening, as I sat in my newly secured home, I received one final text from Nathan. You don't understand what you've done. I can explain everything. I smiled, thinking of all the evidence safely documented and distributed to multiple authorities. Actually, I typed back, I understand perfectly, and unlike your camping photos, I have real receipts. Then I blocked his number and poured myself a glass of wine. Tomorrow would be intense, but tonight, I could savor the fact that Nathan's perfectly constructed house of lies was burning to the ground. The FBI meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. By 8:30, the lobby of Morrison and Webster was in chaos. Nathan and Brianna had apparently tried to flee Punta Cana separately, only to be detained at the airport by Dominican authorities. James Morrison looked like he hadn't slept. 6 clients, he said, rubbing his temples. They blackmailed 6 of our top clients. The total amount is over $2 million, I finished. The forensic accountants had worked through the night. And that's just what we've found so far. Agent Phillips, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, spread photos across the conference table. Nathan and Brianna, with different executives, all following the same pattern. The evidence was overwhelming. Mrs. Thompson, she said, your husband and Ms. Moore will be extradited within 48 hours. But we're more interested in the money trail, those offshore accounts you found. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Nathan using a hotel phone. Baby, please. You're ruining everything. We can work this out. I showed the message to Agent Phillips, who nodded. Keep him talking. Work what out? I texted back. The affair or the felonies? You don't understand, he replied immediately. I did this for us. The money was for our future. I almost laughed. Our future? While you were planning to leave me? Who told you that? Brianna? She's lying. She means nothing. Agent Phillips was recording every message. He's scrambling, she observed. Push harder. Really? I wrote. So you didn't help her set up that account in the Caymans? The one you've been funneling client money into? The typing bubbles appeared and disappeared several times. Finally. How did you find out? I completed his thought. I'm a corporate attorney, Nathan. Following money trails is literally my job. By the way, the FBI says hello. His response was immediate and desperate. I'll tell you where all the money is, just don't let them arrest me. Agent Phillips smiled. Got him. Within hours, Nathan and Brianna were in custody. Their scheme had been bigger than anyone imagined, spanning multiple states, firms, and victims. The FBI found accounts in 3 different countries. James Morrison called an emergency board meeting. The firm's reputation, he began. We'll survive, I interrupted. Because you caught it, reported it, and are making all the victims whole. That's the story we're telling. He looked at me gratefully. Liana, if you want to join us as general counsel... Let me think about it, I said, though I already knew my answer. I had bigger plans. Later that evening, as I sat in my home office, Rachel brought over dinner and wine. So, she said, I heard Nathan's trying to plea bargain. I nodded. Offering to testify against everyone involved in their previous schemes. Apparently, there were more victims than even I found. How are you holding up? I looked around my office, at the degrees on the wall, the case files I'd won, the life I'd built. You know what's funny? He always treated my career like it was a hobby, something I did to pass time until we had kids. He never realized that all those skills, all that experience, it was exactly what I needed to bring him down. Rachel raised her glass. To karma? No, I corrected her, thinking of all the evidence I'd methodically gathered, all the legal strings I'd pulled, all the dominoes I'd carefully set up before knocking them down. To justice, the kind you make happen yourself. The trial was mercifully brief. Nathan and Brianna both took plea deals. He got 8 years, she got 5. The evidence I'd gathered was so comprehensive that their lawyers advised against fighting the charges. In the end, the man who'd spent years manipulating others couldn't talk his way out of this one. I sat in the courtroom during sentencing, wearing the same deep blue suit I'd worn during our first law school mock trial. Nathan couldn't stop staring at me, his face a mask of disbelief and desperation. He'd finally realized that while he was playing checkers, I'd been playing chess. "Your Honor," he tried one last time, "my wife and I could work this out privately." Judge Matthews cut him off. "Mr. Thompson, your wife isn't pressing charges. The federal government is. And we have evidence of multiple counts of wire fraud, blackmail, and embezzlement." I didn't stay to watch him being led away. Instead, I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Denver morning, feeling lighter than I had in years. Morrison and Webster had already promoted me to general counsel, with a corner office and a team of my own. But more importantly, I'd started a side project, a consulting firm helping companies identify and prevent internal fraud. Turns out, there was a huge market for someone who'd uncovered one of the biggest corporate blackmail schemes in Colorado history. Nathan's last letter arrived a week later. I dropped it in the shredder unopened. Some chapters don't need a final page. They just need to end. The media coverage eventually died down, and my life settled into a new rhythm. My fraud consulting firm took off faster than I'd expected, with clients across 3 states seeking my expertise. Sometimes I wondered if Nathan saw the articles about my success from his prison cell. One morning, 6 months after the sentencing, Brianna's former roommate Sarah came to my office. "I heard you help companies protect themselves against fraud now," she said hesitantly. "I'm starting a small business, and I thought, well, after everything that happened..." I studied her for a moment, remembering how her phone call had been the key to unraveling Nathan's entire scheme. "First consultation is free," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Later that evening, as I worked late in my corner office at Morrison and Webster, James Morrison stopped by. "Just signed another client," he said. "They specifically requested you handle their case. Said they heard how you handled the Thompson scandal." I smiled at the irony. Nathan's attempt to destroy me had instead become my biggest selling point. "You know," James added, "he tried to write to me from prison, wanted me to convince you to answer his letters." I kept typing, not looking up. "And?" "I told him you were too busy running 2 successful businesses to read prison mail." I finally looked up, catching my reflection in the office window. The woman staring back wasn't a victim or a betrayed wife. She was a survivor who'd turned betrayal into triumph. "Perfect answer," I said, and went back to work. "There is no job in London, is there?" My voice was barely a whisper as I stared at the email on my laptop screen. Messages between Daniel and someone named Kate filled my vision, laying bare months of calculated deception. It was all just a lie. My husband didn't answer. He stood in our empty living room, empty because we had sold everything for this supposed fresh start, and his silence said more than words ever could. My name is Celine Harris, and until this moment, I thought I was preparing for an exciting new chapter in Minneapolis. As a financial analyst at Parker & Reed, I had built a solid career over the past decade. But when Daniel came home 3 months ago bursting with news about an incredible opportunity in London, I didn't hesitate to support him. That's what partners do, right? They believe in each other. I sold our house, the first home I had ever owned. I donated furniture that I had carefully chosen piece by piece. I even sold my grandmother's antique mirror, the only thing I had left of her, because Daniel insisted we needed to travel light. Now I understood why he had pushed so hard for me to liquidate everything. "How long?" I asked, my voice steadier now as anger began to replace shock. How long have you been planning this with her? Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting toward his packed suitcase by the door. Celine, How long? 8 months, he finally admitted. Kate and it just happened, and then the plan just sort of evolved, like it was some natural progression to systematically destroy your wife's life. I felt sick thinking about how methodically they must have planned this, waiting until I had sold everything, converted all our assets to cash, stripped away every safety net I had built. The money's already gone, isn't it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'm a financial analyst. I should have seen the signs. But love makes you blind, and I had trusted him completely. You'll land on your feet, Daniel said, reaching for his suitcase. You always do. As he walked toward the door, I felt something shift inside me. He was right about one thing. I always landed on my feet, and this time would be no different. As the door clicked shut behind him, I opened my laptop and began to type. Daniel had no idea who he was dealing with. Daniel and I met 6 years ago during a financial technology conference in Minneapolis. I remember being impressed by his drive and ambition. He was working for a smaller firm but had big dreams of making it to the top. What I didn't realize then was that his ambition would eventually consume everything, including our marriage. Looking back, I can see the warning signs I chose to ignore. Like how he always seemed to take more than he gave. When we first got married, I had just received a significant promotion at Parker & Reed. Instead of celebrating my success, Daniel convinced me to use my bonus to help him start his own consulting business. It's an investment in our future, he'd said. I believed him. That was my first mistake, but far from my last. For years, I supported his ventures, both financially and emotionally. When his first business failed, I worked overtime to keep us afloat. When he wanted to try again, I took out a loan against my 401k to fund it. Each time he swore things would be different. Each time, I believed him. My cousin Nina tried to warn me last year. Celine, she'd said during one of our coffee dates, don't you think it's strange that Daniel never wants you involved in his business decisions? You're literally a financial analyst. I defended him, of course. He doesn't want to burden me, I'd replied. Besides, he's my husband. I trust him. Trust. What a foolish word that seems now. The signs were all there. The late-night phone calls he'd take in the garage. The sudden business trips that he could never quite explain. The way he started encouraging me to sell my assets months ago, claiming we needed to simplify our lives. I had nearly $400,000 in equity from the house sale, plus another $200,000 from my retirement accounts and investments. All of it converted to cash, just like he suggested, to make the international move easier. All of it now gone, transferred to accounts I couldn't trace. The irony doesn't escape me. I spend my days analyzing financial patterns for multi-million-dollar corporations, identifying inconsistencies and preventing fraud. Yet I couldn't, or wouldn't, see what was happening in my own home. But as I sat there in our empty rental house, surrounded by nothing but packed boxes and broken dreams, something inside me hardened. I might have been blind before, but my eyes were wide open now. And what I was about to do would make Daniel wish he'd never underestimated me. My hands trembled as I dug deeper into Daniel's email history. Each message revealed another layer of their scheme. Kate wasn't just Daniel's mistress. She was a former client who'd helped him orchestrate everything. They'd been planning their escape for months, carefully manipulating me into liquidating all our assets. The wife suspects nothing, Daniel had written to her 6 weeks ago. She's too busy planning our imaginary life in London to notice anything else. Almost makes me feel bad for her. Almost. The casualness of that word made my stomach turn. I printed everything, my analyst's mind kicking into gear. Their messages painted a clear picture. While I was selling our house and dissolving my life in Minneapolis, they were setting up their new one in Austin. They'd already bought a house there, using my money, of course. The deed was in Kate's name, dated just 3 days ago. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "I'm sorry it ended this way. I've left signed divorce papers with my lawyer. It's better for both of us to make this quick and clean." Quick and clean, like ripping off a Band-Aid. Except he'd taken everything, leaving me with nothing but packed boxes and an empty rental house I couldn't afford. I called Parker and Reed, my hands shaking. Linda, my boss, answered on the second ring. "I need help," I said, my voice cracking. "I can't come to London next month for the client meeting because there is no London." The whole story spilled out. There was a long pause before Linda spoke. "Celine, I need you to listen carefully. What Daniel and his accomplice have done isn't just morally wrong. It's criminal fraud. You need to call the police right now. Then call your bank. I'm texting you the number of a good lawyer. Use it. And Celine, your job is secure. Take whatever time you need." I felt the first tears roll down my cheeks. Not from sadness, but from relief at having at least one anchor in my life. The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls. Police, banks, lawyer. Each conversation hammered home the magnitude of what Daniel had done. But it was a call from my bank that finally broke me. "Mrs. Harris, I'm afraid the majority of the transfers were authorized by you," the fraud representative said gently. "Since you willingly converted and moved the assets, there's very little we can do." I hung up and looked around the empty house. Empty because I had deliberately stripped it bare for our fresh start. In the fading afternoon light, I caught my reflection in the window. I barely recognized myself. But as I stared at my reflection, something shifted in my eyes. I was a financial analyst who specialized in tracking money trails. I had contacts, skills, and knowledge that Daniel knew nothing about. He thought he had broken me, but he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. I spent the next week working from my cousin Nina's guest room, converting it into what looked like a detective's office. Every wall was covered with printouts, bank statements, property records, email trails. Each night I stayed up late, following the money trail Daniel had left behind. "You need to sleep," Nina said, bringing me coffee one morning. She looked at the dark circles under my eyes with concern. "You can't keep going like this." "I can't sleep," I replied, scrolling through another bank statement. "Not while they're living it up with my money in Austin." I'd already traced the largest transfer, $380,000 that had moved through 3 different banks before landing in an account in Kate's name. That money had bought their house, a fact that made my blood boil. They were probably decorating it right now with expensive furniture while I slept on an air mattress. My lawyer, Sarah Mitchell, called with an update that made everything worse. "The police are treating it as a civil matter," she explained. "Since you authorized the transfers, and there's evidence you knew about the accounts." "Because he told me they were for our move," I interrupted. "For our supposed new life in London." "I understand," Sarah said patiently, "but proving fraud will be difficult. These cases often come down to he said, she said, and the paper trail shows your consent." I hung up feeling defeated. That evening, I made my first mistake. I called Daniel. "You won't get away with this," I said when he answered. He chuckled, actually chuckled. "Get away with what? You signed everything over willingly. Check the paperwork, Celine. You're the financial expert, after all." "I'll fight this," I warned. "I'll take you to court." "With what money?" His voice was calm, confident. "Face it, Celine. It's over. Move on." After he hung up, I did something I hadn't allowed myself to do yet. I broke down completely. All the stress, anger, and humiliation came pouring out. Nina found me sitting on the floor, surrounded by papers, sobbing. "I've lost everything," I whispered. "My home, my savings, my retirement. Everything I worked for is just gone." Nina sat down beside me, picking up one of the bank statements. "Not everything," she said firmly. "You still have your skills, your intelligence, and you have me." She was right about one thing. I still had my skills. And as I wiped my eyes, an idea started forming. Daniel had manipulated me personally, but professionally, I was still at the top of my game. At Parker and Reed, I had access to sophisticated financial tracking tools, ones that could follow money trails far more effectively than personal bank searches. I called Linda the next morning. "I need to take some vacation days," I said, "and I need a favor." Linda listened as I explained my plan. When I finished, there was a long pause. "You understand what you're asking?" she said finally. "Using company resources for personal matters is against policy." "I know," I replied quietly. "But I also know how many times my work has saved the company millions. I've never asked for anything in return. Until now." Another pause. "You have 2 weeks of vacation time," she said finally. "What you do with that time is your business. Just be careful, Celine, and don't do anything illegal." I hung up feeling energized for the first time in days. Daniel thought he had won, thought he had broken me, but he was about to learn a hard lesson. Never underestimate a woman who knows how to follow the money. Using Parker and Reed's financial tracking software after hours felt strange, but I pushed aside my guilt. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice. The programs I used daily to trace corporate fraud patterns started revealing something unexpected about Daniel and Kate's scheme. "They got sloppy," I told Nina over breakfast. "They thought they covered their tracks, but they made rookie mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" she asked, leaning forward. "Kate's been moving money between accounts, trying to hide the trail. But she's using a pattern, transferring funds every 3 days, always in specific amounts. The software picked up on it immediately." But that wasn't the biggest revelation. As I dug deeper, I discovered something that made my heart race. Daniel and Kate had been running a small-scale Ponzi scheme through his consulting business. They'd defrauded at least 6 other people before targeting me. I found my hands shaking as I read through the evidence. Names, dates, amounts. It was all there. They'd used their charm to convince people to invest, show them fake returns for a few months, then disappear with the money. I wasn't their first victim. I was just their biggest score yet. I called Sarah immediately. "This changes everything," she said after I explained. "We're no longer looking at a divorce dispute. We're looking at wire fraud and investment fraud. This is federal territory now." But I wasn't ready to go to the authorities yet. I needed more proof, and I had another card to play first. I reached out to Marcus, an old college friend who now worked at the bank where Kate had opened her newest account. Over coffee, I laid out what I'd found. "Jesus, Celine," he said, reviewing the documents. "This is serious stuff." "I know," I replied. "That's why I need your help." What happened next was like watching dominoes fall. Marcus flagged Kate's account for suspicious activity. This triggered an automatic freeze right when they were closing on another investment property. The timing couldn't have been better. Within hours, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "What did you do?" It was Kate, showing her first sign of panic. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded all my evidence to the other victims I'd identified. One by one, they started coming forward, each with their own story of betrayal. Linda called me that evening. "Celine, we've been contacted by the FBI about some irregular transactions you've flagged in our system." I took a deep breath. "I can explain everything." "No need," she interrupted. "I've already told them you had my authorization to use the software. They want to meet with you tomorrow." That night, I sat in Nina's guest room, staring at my laptop screen. I had access to one more nuclear option, an option I'd been saving. Daniel had made one critical mistake. He'd used the same password for everything since college, including his email. With a few keystrokes, I logged into his account. There it was. Every conversation with Kate, every plan they'd made, every lie they'd told. I downloaded everything, my finger hovering over the forward button. With one click, I could send it all to his entire professional network. I thought about how he'd laughed on the phone, so confident in his victory. The old Selene might have hesitated, might have shown mercy. But I wasn't the old Selena anymore. I clicked send. The response was immediate and devastating. Within hours of sending those emails, Daniel's professional world imploded. His clients, colleagues, and business partners all received documented proof of his fraud scheme. His phone must have been exploding with messages because he finally broke his silence. "You've ruined me," he texted. "Are you happy now?" I stared at his message, feeling nothing but cold determination. "No, Daniel, I'm just getting started." The FBI meeting the next morning was intense. I sat in a sterile conference room with 2 agents, methodically walking them through everything I'd uncovered. They seemed particularly interested in the pattern of fraud against multiple victims. "Mrs. Harris," Agent Roberts said, "what you've uncovered here isn't just one isolated incident. This appears to be a sophisticated criminal enterprise." I handed them my final piece of evidence, a detailed spreadsheet tracking every transaction, every victim, every dollar. "They thought they could hide their trail," I explained. "But money always leaves footprints if you know where to look." That's when things took an unexpected turn. Agent Roberts slid a document across the table. "We've been watching Ms. Catherine Bennett, Kate, for the past year. She's been involved in similar schemes in 3 other states." My heart stopped. "What?" "She's a professional con artist, Mrs. Harris. And it seems your husband was not just her accomplice. He may have been her mark, too." I felt the room spin slightly. The agent's words hit me like a physical blow. Could Daniel have been played as well? Had Kate manipulated him the same way they'd manipulated me? But before I could process this revelation, my phone buzzed with an urgent message from Marcus. "Kate's trying to empty the frozen accounts. She's at the bank right now, making a scene." I excused myself and called Marcus immediately. "She's threatening legal action," he explained. "Says she'll sue the bank for wrongful account freezing. She's got a lawyer with her." "Don't release anything," I insisted. "The FBI is involved now." "There's more," Marcus added, his voice tense. "She's claiming the money was a legitimate business investment. She's got documentation with your signature on it." My blood ran cold. I remembered signing a stack of papers Daniel had given me, supposedly for our London move. "Those signatures were obtained under false pretenses," I argued. "That may be true, but it complicates things legally." I rushed back into the conference room where the FBI agents were preparing to leave. "Kate's at Meridian Bank right now," I blurted out. "She's trying to access the accounts." They exchanged glances. "Mrs. Harris," Agent Roberts said carefully, "we need you to understand something. If you've taken any actions that could be considered illegal—" "Everything I did was legal," I interrupted. "I just followed the money. That's my job." But as they hurried out, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Had I gone too far? Had my desire for revenge made me sloppy? I pulled out my phone and called Sarah, my lawyer. As it rang, I saw another text from Daniel. "You have no idea what you've started. Kate isn't who you think she is. We're both in danger now." For the first time since this began, I felt a flicker of fear. What had I actually stumbled into? "I need to speak with Daniel." I made this decision after a sleepless night of weighing my options. If Kate was really who the FBI claimed, I needed to understand the full scope of what we were dealing with. Nina thought I was crazy to even consider it. "He'll just manipulate you again," she warned. But I wasn't the same naive woman who had trusted him blindly. I arranged to meet Daniel at a coffee shop near Nina's house, making sure it was public and well-populated. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. Gone was his usual confident demeanor. He looked haunted, nervous. "Kate's gone," he said without preamble, sliding into the seat across from me. "She cleared out everything she could access before the accounts were frozen. Even the house has been sold." "How does it feel?" I asked coldly. "Being the one who's left with nothing?" His hands trembled as he placed a USB drive on the table. "I kept records of everything. Every transaction, Every conversation, every scheme she planned. I thought I could use it as insurance, but she's always been 10 steps ahead. I stared at the drive, then at my broken husband. In that moment, I made my final move. I pulled out my phone and dialed Agent Roberts while Daniel watched, his face draining of color. "I have everything you need," I said into the phone, "and a witness ready to testify." Daniel's shoulders slumped in defeat as I hung up. He knew it was over. Kate might have escaped with some money, but she'd lost her partner and her cover. As for Daniel, he was about to learn that betrayal comes with consequences, one way or another. The aftermath unfolded faster than I expected. With Daniel's testimony and the evidence I'd gathered, the FBI tracked Kate to Miami, where they arrested her attempting to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. She had accounts scattered across 5 states and victims going back 6 years. Daniel, in exchange for his cooperation, received a lighter sentence, 5 years instead of 15. I attended their sentencing hearings, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom. As I watched them both being led away in handcuffs, I felt no joy, no sadness, just a profound sense of closure. "The funds will be recovered and distributed among the victims," Agent Roberts told me afterward. "It'll take time, but you should get most of your money back." But I had already moved on. Parker and Reed had promoted me to head of their new fraud detection unit, inspired by how I'd uncovered Kate's scheme. I bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, truly mine this time. Nina helped me move in, arranging furniture and hanging pictures on a sunny Saturday afternoon. "You know what's funny?" I said, unpacking a box of books. "Daniel always said I was too trusting, too naive. Turns out I just trusted the wrong people." "And now?" Nina asked. I smiled, thinking of my new team at work, the other victims I'd helped, the life I'd rebuilt from scratch. Now I trust myself. And that's enough. Later that evening, standing in my new kitchen, I raised a glass to my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me was stronger, wiser, and finally, completely free.